I never thought I'd be the guy sitting here, writing this kind of story, but here we are. My name's Mike, and I've been with my wife, Lisa, for about 6 years now. At first, everything seemed perfect. She was smart, funny, a bit bitchy, but in that irresistible way. We had our routines, our little inside jokes, and honestly, I thought we had a solid thing going. But lately, things started feeling off. She became distant, quick to snap over nothing, and she'd suddenly have these late nights at work that she'd brush off like they were nothing. I didn't have solid proof, but it was enough to make me suspicious. I guess the first real sign was the way she started hiding her phone more. She'd be glued to it, and when I tried to look, she'd get defensive, tossing it aside or changing the subject. I also noticed her changing her routine, more trips to visit her sister, but she'd come back with a strange smell or makeup smudges I'd never seen on her before. I tried to brush it off, telling myself I was paranoid. Maybe I was overthinking. Until one day, something happened that just shattered everything I thought I knew. It was a random Tuesday, and I decided to surprise her at work because she had mentioned she was swamped. I walked into her office and found her sitting there, her face flushed, but she quickly scrambled to hide her phone when I entered. I thought it was weird but didn't make a fuss. As I sat down, I noticed her glance at her phone nervously and then hide it behind her back. That moment, I felt a prick in my gut. Something was definitely wrong. Later that evening, I decided to check her email on her laptop, something I'd never done before, but I was desperate for answers. What I found wasn't just work emails or meaningless chatter. No, I found a string of messages, flirty, suggestive, talking about how much she loved the weekend trip she'd taken. A trip she told me was a girls' weekend at her sister's place. But the emails were from her boss, a guy named Mark, and they were full of references to how much fun they had, how naughty they'd been, and how much they wanted to see each other again. That's when I realized she wasn't at her sister's house at all. She was with her boss, probably fucking him. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. All those little lies, all those late nights, the way she'd assure me she was just working or visiting her sister and she was really with him. I couldn't even breathe for a second. I sat there staring at the screen, trying to process what I'd just seen. The woman I loved, the woman I married, was cheating on me. During a weekend she said was for her family. I don't even know how I got home that night, but I was just numb. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. My head was pounding and my stomach was in knots. I couldn't get the images from last night out of my head. Her lying about being with her sister, the emails from Mark suggesting they had a whole weekend sex marathon, probably in some cheap hotel. I kept thinking about how she'd always been a bitch about my friends, my hobbies, even my family, but she was out there doing God knows what with her boss. It was like a punch in the gut every time I tried to go about my day, knowing she'd betrayed me that badly. I didn't want to jump to conclusions without talking to her first, but I couldn't sit on it either. I decided to confront her that morning. My hands were sweaty, my voice trembling as I called her, and she picked up after the third ring. I told her I wanted to talk. When she got home, she was already defensive, her usual sharp tone creeping in. I just laid it out, showed her what I found, the emails, the receipts, everything. Her face went from annoyed to stunned, then quickly turned into a sneer. "Oh, come on, Mike," she snapped, rolling her eyes. "That's just workplace banter, you're overreacting. Mark and I are just friends, you're so paranoid. You think I'd cheat on you? Seriously." I felt that familiar rage bubbling up, but I also felt a deep hurt that I couldn't shake. I told her I wasn't stupid, that I knew she'd been lying for weeks. She started crying, but it was the fake kind, more for show than actual remorse. "You don't understand how stressful my job is," she whined. "Mark is just a boss, a friend, it's nothing serious." And then she threw in, "You're just jealous because I'm better at my job than you are at understanding women." That was the moment I knew her lies were endless. She was trying to spin it like I was crazy, like I was the one making it all up. But it was all there. The emails, the hotel receipts confirmed by her own credit card. She had booked a room for two, paid for it herself, and I saw the hotel name clearly. She had lied about everything. I felt a mix of anger, betrayal, and just utter confusion. Why would she do this? What was I missing? How could she sit there and lie to my face like that? I told her I needed some space, that I couldn't be with someone who lied to me that way. She started crying harder, calling me every name in the book: jealous, controlling, paranoid. She tried to make me feel guilty for catching her, for ruining everything, but I couldn't even look at her without feeling disgusted. I walked out of the house, the weight of it all pressing down on me. I didn't know if I'd be able to forgive her, or even if I wanted to. All I knew was that my world had turned upside down, and I was just trying to hold myself together. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying everything I'd uncovered: her lying so effortlessly, her sneering tone, the whole weekend she insisted she was with her sister. I kept thinking about how she always called me insecure whenever I brought up her secrecy, how she'd get defensive over the slightest questions about her whereabouts. And now I knew why. She'd been hiding this affair with her boss, Mark, probably for months. The thought of her in that hotel, probably sexing him up, made me feel sick. I'd trusted her. I had no idea she was capable of such deception. I knew I had to get some clarity, some real answers, so I decided to dig deeper. I started searching her phone, her email, her social media accounts again, anything I could find. I wanted to understand how deep this went. I found more messages, explicit messages, flirtatious talk about how much she liked Mark's power, how they'd spend the weekend together, and how she loved feeling wanted. It was clear she'd been lying to my face repeatedly, and I was just blind to it entirely. How could I not see the signs? How did I miss the way she'd suddenly become cold and dismissive, or how she'd always have her phone hidden? The more I found, the more furious I became. I was furious at her, obviously, but also at myself. How could I have been so blind? I'd been working long hours trying to provide for us, and meanwhile she was sneaking around, probably laughing at me behind my back. The betrayal cut so deep I started questioning everything: myself, my relationship, whether I'd ever been enough for her. I kept asking myself, was I just some fool who thought he was happy? Was I just a placeholder while she played her little game with Mark? I knew I had to confront her again, but this time I wasn't going to do it without a plan. I started thinking about what I wanted to do next. Part of me wanted to explode, to just ruin her, to tear her down as badly as she'd hurt me. But another part, a darker part, was to get revenge. I wanted her to feel what I was feeling, to taste that betrayal. I knew I couldn't just walk away. No, I had to make her suffer just a little for how she'd shattered my trust. So I started setting things in motion. I called her boss, Mark, leaving a message pretending to be someone from HR, asking about their professional relationship and suggesting I was onto their little secret. I also kept my eyes open for other opportunities, other ways to make her regret what she'd done. I wasn't just going to dump her and walk away. No, I wanted her to feel the full weight of what she'd broken. The idea of hurting her back in some subtle way kept me sane through the sleepless nights. I didn't think I'd get over this easily, but I knew one thing: this wasn't the end. Not by a long shot. The days that followed were a blur of anger, confusion, and a strange sense of clarity. I kept everything to myself, but inside I was brewing a storm. I couldn't just confront her again. She'd already lied so many times, spun her web of bullshit. I needed to hit her where it hurt, in a way she wouldn't see coming. That's when I started working on my plan for revenge. I didn't want to just walk away. I wanted her to realize what she threw away, and maybe, just maybe, feel some of the pain she caused. I began by gathering proof of her affair: more hotel receipts, copies of the emails, screenshots of the flirtatious texts. I wanted to be ready for whatever she threw at me, whether she tried to deny everything or turn the tables. I also started monitoring her phone and social media, seeing who she was talking to, where she was going. Every little detail, every lie, I was cataloging it. I knew this was petty, but I didn't care. She'd played dirty, so I was going to fight dirty too. One day, I got a tip from a friend I confided in. He told me about Mark's reputation, how he was known for sleeping with married women, how he'd done this more than once, and how he was probably living his best life while I was sitting here, feeling like a fool. That made me hate him even more. I decided I'd do something about it. Not just for me, but for every man who got played by that snake. I wanted to make Mark regret ever messing with my wife, so I started planning some subtle revenge. I created a fake email account, reached out to Mark and started a conversation. Nothing overt, just enough to make him uncomfortable to tell him I knew what he'd been doing. I sent him some of the proof I'd collected, hotel receipts, the emails, and told him I was done being naive. I warned him that if he kept messing with my wife, he'd regret it. I wasn't just bluffing. I wanted to see if he'd get scared, if he'd back off. It was a game now, a game I intended to win. Meanwhile, I kept quiet around Lisa, pretending everything was fine. I didn't want her to catch wind of my plan. I wanted her to think I was still clueless, still trusting. That was part of the revenge too, making her believe I wasn't onto her. I'd sit there pretending to be normal, while inside I was boiling with rage. Every time she'd try to lie her way out of it, I'd just smile and play along. I knew I was close to breaking her, and I wanted to see how far I could push her. This whole situation was tearing me apart. I felt like I was living someone else's nightmare, a terrible soap opera I never signed up for. But I also knew I couldn't let her walk all over me, not anymore. I was done being the fool. I was done pretending everything was okay. Whatever came next, I was ready for it. I just hoped I'd find a way to come out of this in one piece. Over the next few days, I watched her carefully, waiting for her to slip up or reveal herself somehow. She kept up her usual act, acting like everything was fine, snippy when I asked about her day, pressing her to spend time with me like nothing was wrong. But I could see the cracks in her facade. She was nervous, jumping at shadows, and I caught her several times glancing at her phone with that guilty look in her eyes. I didn't say a word. I was biding my time, letting her dig her own grave. Then it happened. One evening she had been unusually quiet, standoffish. And I decided to push a little. I asked her outright if she'd been honest with me. That's when she snapped, telling me I was paranoid, that I was imagining things, that Mark was just her boss and nothing more. She spun her usual lies, but I didn't buy a single word. I pulled out the evidence, the hotel receipts, the emails, laid it all on the table. Her face drained of color, and she looked like she wanted to vanish. That was the moment I finally saw her true colors. She didn't even try to deny it anymore. Instead, she started crying, throwing a fit about how I was ruining her career, how she loved me but needed something more, and how I was just insecure. She called me a jealous idiot, told me I was overreacting and that I should get help. But I knew better. She was cornered, and she knew I had everything. The truth was out now, and there was no way to spin her way out of it. I felt a strange mixture of relief and disgust. Relief that I finally had answers, that I could finally move on, whatever that meant. Disgust because I realized I'd been played for a fool, that the woman I loved had no real respect or loyalty for me. I looked at her crying there, trying to beg her way out of it, and I felt nothing but contempt. I wanted to make her understand what she'd lost, what she'd thrown away. She was a bitch, a liar, and a cheat, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it without paying some kind of price. I told her I needed a break, that I wasn't going to stay in the same house with her anymore. I packed a bag and left, didn't even bother to argue, just walked out the door. Part of me wanted to scream, to yell, to break everything in sight, but I held it in. I knew this was just the beginning, and I had a lot more plans. I didn't want her to think I was giving up. No, I was going to make sure she paid for what she did, one way or another. This wasn't just about love anymore. It was about justice, about making her see she wasn't as clever as she thought she was. The weeks that followed were a roller coaster of emotions. I stayed away from her, trying to find some clarity amid the chaos. I told myself I'd forgive her if she truly showed remorse, but deep down, I knew that trust was gone for good. Every time I thought about it, my stomach clenched, and I felt that familiar rage bubble up again. I started focusing on myself, working out, clearing my head, reconnecting with friends I'd neglected. But the truth was, a part of me was still angry, still hurt, and probably always would be. What really hit me was how much my life had changed in just a few weeks. I'd gone from being the guy who thought he had it all figured out to someone who'd been blindsided by someone he loved and trusted. That betrayal made me question everything: my judgment, my relationship choices, my own worth. But I also realized something. I deserved better. I deserved someone who wouldn't lie, cheat, or betray me for some fleeting moment of pleasure. So I made a decision. I moved out of the house for good, filed for divorce, and promised myself I'd never let anyone treat me like that again. I didn't contact her after I left. I didn't respond to her apologies or her desperate attempts to reach out. I just let her stew in her guilt, knowing she'd lost something she never really appreciated. I don't hate her, I'm just done. Done with the lying, done with the betrayal. Looking back, I don't regret discovering the truth. It hurt like hell, sure, but it also set me free. It taught me that sometimes you have to go through the worst to understand what you truly deserve. I've learned that love isn't just about trust, it's about respect, loyalty, and honesty. And if those things are missing, then what's left isn't worth holding on to. Now I'm rebuilding my life piece by piece. I know I'll never forget what happened, but I also know I'll be stronger for it. I hope sharing this might help someone else who's been betrayed, because no matter how painful it is, you'll get through it. You just have to be honest with yourself, stand up for what you deserve, and never settle for less. Life goes on, and I'm finally ready to live it again.